What's up, guys? So this week things are going to be a little different because I'm away on vacation at the time of this episode's release, and I just wanted to throw something together so we could discuss the highlights from this episode instead of my more normal detailed recaps, which we will definitely be back to for episode 6 because there is a lot to talk about there. So the first major highlight of episode 5 is definitely Randall's first night sleeping on the bus, which is how episode 5 starts off. He hears the monsters outside screaming and knocking at the window as he tries to sleep, and they are like, "No, wake that ass up. We're not done with you yet." Then he gets aggravated and jumps up like he's about to open the door and storm outside, but luckily he doesn't allow his anger, aggression, and stupidity get the best of him in this situation. Then we see Granny from season 1, the old lady who killed poor Megan and her mother, and we see her asking Randall if he's comfortable in there. But Randall starts yelling at them and they just give up and walk away. And it's pretty obvious to the monsters that, okay, we're not going to be able to persuade him to leave the bus. But they do say, like, see you later. So we'll catch your ass once you're out here because something's going to happen and you're going to get caught outside. So, it's kind of like that kind of attitude they had while they just walked away. But hands down, the funniest part was when Randall was like, "You can't get in here because there's a fucking rock in the fucking window." And honestly, Jay better watch out because Randall is coming for his spot of being the funniest character in the show, because that was pretty damn funny. And also, I gotta give the creators props because this was definitely one of the creepiest scenes in the show so far. It was such a very simple scene, but I don't know, it just had the nuance of being very creepy. Just seeing them stand around the bus waiting for Randall to come to the door to see if he'd be stupid enough to open it was pretty suspenseful. And for some reason, I was thinking that the talisman might fall off the window after he started knocking on the glass as they were walking away. He was knocking pretty hard, so I was like, oh shit. But of course, lucky for him, that didn't happen. But for some reason, I was expecting something crazier to happen. Then we cut over to the bar where I guess Jade has now taken Tom's old home, which Tom used to live in the bar, but Tom is dead now, so why not? It's a vacant spot. But he wakes up and takes a look at the picture of Christopher and Victor again. And suddenly Christopher appears in the doorway. He opens the notebook to reveal the symbol and blood starts pouring out of the notebook. And then suddenly Jade's vision of Christopher disappears and he jumps up and yells in frustration. So yeah, not really a whole lot to talk about there. This is just some foreshadowing in this episode of what's to come later with Jade, Victor, and Christopher since we finally learn about who Christopher was. So of course later we find out that Kenny told the Matthews about Boyd hiding Sarah and they confront him, and basically that just leads to little Ethan having the courage to not be afraid of her anymore. He says that in a quest, you have to face the scary things and that's how you take their power away. And also, I think maybe this is a hint at something much larger in the show, maybe how they ultimately get out of here. There's always been this sort of special theme around fear in the show, so I'm thinking that's going to play a bigger part later. For Sarah, this episode is just everyone dealing with her being back, and then taking their anger out on her or kind of struggling with finding forgiveness for her. By the end of this episode, Jem seems to be convinced that Sarah is just a victim of the town and not some crazy person who just wants to hurt and kill people. And mainly it seems like they are going in the redemption arc direction for her character, which if you ask me, it clearly tells us that she's going to be playing a bigger role, which of course she is. She's still the only person I think who hears voices in the town, so that makes her incredibly valuable actually. Also in this episode, we see that Tabitha basically builds the puzzle toy at the entrance of the monster tunnels to summon the little dirty ball children, which I assume that's what she's trying to do because she builds it and then she sort of steps back and kind of looks around, so I'm expecting her to expect something to happen. And they begin chanting a word that sounds like uncooey. I'm not sure, but if it sounds like a word anyone recognizes, please write it down in the comments below and tell us what it means. And we begin to see them creeping in from the woods and they start to crowd around her, and then they begin to lightly claw at her while still chanting this word uncooey. I believe I'm saying that correctly, uncooey. I've been kind of going back and forth about whether or not if the kids are threatening Tabitha, but I'm beginning to believe that that is just what the creators want us to think, and eventually the kids will be helpful to her in some way, but that's just my theory. Later in that scene, Jade shows up and Tabitha asked him if he could also see the children, and of course he says no, but I do think eventually this will lead to both of them having a conversation about how they both see shit. Also in this episode, we can presume that Tilly is sick, and she is dying, and that is the reason why she may be carrying herself differently than everyone else. And I assume that she has cancer because of the conversation with Christy regarding the liquid morphine, but this is just my guess because she doesn't actually say what she was diagnosed with. And Christy is just such a grade A medical professional that she doesn't even need to be told why Tilly needs liquid morphine because it was just so obvious to her. Sure. I mean, who knows? Maybe I missed something. You guys, please let me know down in the comments if I'm just ignorant to the medical slang or something. But they just look at each other and exchange looks. And Christy's like, oh, that's what you have. And I'm like, what? So yeah, I thought that was a bit weird. And later in the episode, we find out that Christy's fiance, Marielle, is a drug addict. And we see her at the end of the episode getting some drops of that liquid morphine that Tilly dropped off earlier. So that's also something to keep in mind. And now let's discuss the biggest highlight of the episode, which is Jade finally finding out about Victor arriving with his mother and the information we discovered surrounding the guy in the photo, Christopher. So Victor tells Jade how his mom would play the lullaby Twinkle Twinkle Little Star when he was afraid. And he said at night when they would hide and they could hear people screaming, his mom would tell him to think about the twinkling stars, and then afterwards he wouldn't be afraid anymore. And this is why he wanted Jade to play that lullaby in particular, which is also the name of the episode. And I also think he said that he would sit in that place on the top of their car when she would play him that song. Then Victor proceeds to tell Jade about Christopher and shows him Christopher's old car. Victor tells Jade that Christopher was a nice guy who used to make everyone laugh, and then he changed after he started seeing the symbol. He told Jade that Christopher basically went mad and started killing people after he saw that symbol, which is pretty crazy because we're going to think about that correlation to Jade. Alright guys, so that is basically all the highlights that I could think of from episode 5. Please tell me what you all thought the major highlights of this episode was, and have any of your theories changed about Victor, Jade, or Tabitha after seeing episode 5. Let me know down in the comments below, but I'll catch you guys next time, and as always, thank you for watching.